Welcome to the Latvian Football Podcast Special Eurocups edition, and the excitement continues as European games carry on. RFS Larne tie just finished up, and Auda Torshavn B36 finished a little bit before both teams go through. And joining me to reflect on what happened in the Champions League tie is Peter Cinnamon of the Kicking Match, the Irish League podcast. Hi, Peter.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, I suppose condolences are in order as RFS very convincingly have gone through.
Yeah, convincing is probably an understatement on this occasion. I think RFS has been a boogeyman or a bit of a punchline in the Irish League, Northern Ireland football circles for the past 2 years. That game against Linfield was seen as a bit of a sliding doors moment in regards to the opportunity for European football and the current growth, or at least the viewed upon growth of the league, and that flipping on its head was seen as a big moment. And then Larne being this team that's emerged in a way within Irish League circles since that defeat for Linfield, and this was like Larne's chance 2 leagues in a row. They go against a team that, at least from our perspective, Linfield should have beaten 2 years ago, and it was seen as a good draw. And then Larne go away to Riga, and they find out that this is not the RFS that Linfield played against 2 seasons before. They were totally outclassed in the first game. I thought Larne came out a bit better in the second game to start off the first half, but as soon as RFS stretched their legs, showed their muscles, they showed the incredible quality that they have, and probably the physical and fitness dominance that they had over Larne as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're under no impression about the Linfield game 2 years ago. I mean, we know it was lucky that RFS had gone through. In fact, they had gone through that tie without being in the lead for a single minute of the tie, which already tells you something, because it was on penalties, obviously. 5 players from that team still play. The rest of the team has changed, and yeah, as you said, it's a stronger team. It's a stronger team. We didn't consider Larne to be an easy draw, mainly based on the Linfield experience, but yeah, it was just they didn't deliver, not really.
And what that originally started, questions being raised and these discussions being raised, and something that kind of circles our league quite a lot, is this talk of Larne going into this game cold, pretty much their first competitive, or was their first real competitive game that they've played since the league season started. And here they are going against a similarly sized nation, against a team who's top of their league, all guns blazing. And I think you watch the first 15-20 minutes of the tie in Riga, and you can see, wow, did RFS look sharp, they look confident. Larne looked a bit shell-shocked and totally rusty. And I think ultimately that first game in particular, it was all signed, sealed, delivered pretty much by the time that third goal went in after half-time. And to be honest, Larne were lucky to go in that first game, only 2-0, I think it was down. But, I mean, RFS look very, very impressive. And you hear all this talk of the £1 million players, is it Emerson? And I mean, I spoke about a sliding doors moment. Like, for RFS, did getting into the Europa Conference League, did that completely revolutionize and change that team, or was it not as simple as that?
No, it didn't really change anything. The biggest change that happened to RFS is that they could expedite the development of their academy system. That was the biggest change, and possibly indirectly the construction of the LNK Sporta Parks, where Larne played last week. that probably helped as well. Emerson, he wasn't purchased for €1 million. They pulled him out of Brazil when he was playing futsal, and he's a home developed player within RFS.
But that's the hype around our league, that this is the quality of player, this is what he's being valued at, and
Yeah,
I'm sure it's
yeah,
exciting though for RFS to get through, dominate across 2 games, and now they look forward to next round of the Champions League
yeah.
qualifiers.
Well, the exciting thing here is, yes, of course, it's fantastic for RFS. It's a lovely paycheck. It's quite an achievement. Bodø Glimt are next. We'll talk about that later. But most importantly, it's been 15 years since a Latvian club overcame the first qualifying round of the Champions League, and last time it was FK Ventspils. So it's been a long, long time, and it almost happened on a number of occasions, but it never did. And now it did, and this is why we're so happy. 7-0 is an impolite result on aggregate. 3-0, 4-0 away is just, I mean, it is what it is, but it doesn't have to be that way. But
it,
it's going through to the second qualifying round of Champions League. That is the cherry on top here.
is now the aim, because getting that first win in the Champions path is so vital, because Bodo Glimt will be massive favourites, I imagine. If that doesn't work out, you then drop into the Europa Conference League, and then if that doesn't work out, then you could then would drop down, as I would remember with Linfield a couple of years ago, and when we eventually met RFS, when they met RFS, um, that it gives you the chance that you can now lose a couple of ties, bank the money, and you've got that one-off playoff game against hopefully an easier nation than what might pop up in the mainstream
Yeah,
qualification
that's the
leagues.
main benefit of this. You get extra lives, which is fantastic. But how's the mood in Northern Ireland?
Mood is pretty poor, because you spend all year fighting for these European places. We look at the draw across the division, and the assessment was that actually the draw for all four of our teams was very good. We all knew that Larne had that challenge, and last week across, now they played away in all those ties, but all three teams, Linfield, Crusaders, and Larne, all lost. None of them scored a goal, and they now go into this second tie trying to fight for their lives. And we kind of knew the RFS thing wasn't going to work out for Larne, but they have another bite of the cherry now in the Conference League, and they actually get a nice little bonus because they're able to skip through a qualifying round just by luck of the draw, luck of the chance, kind of a wild card almost. For Crusaders, as we speak, we don't know what's happening with Crusaders. They were 2-0 down to a team from the Welsh division. Again, very nice draw in that. And as we're speaking, it's currently extra time in that draw. They were 3-0 down across aggregate. And what happened? I'm trying to. The stream's now down at the minute, but we're trying to see. So that's positive for them. And then Linfield, they've got to try and bring back a tie from being 2-0 down. But home advantage is key, and they can see if they can take what was an awful week for Irish League football last week and try and turn it around this week now, and then going into next week where Northern Irish opposition will face off against Latvian opposition again.
Yeah, the story isn't over because Auda, having gone through B36 Torshavn from Faroe Islands, will now face Northern Irish Cup winners Cliftonville.
And I think, again, as I said, when the draw came out for all four teams, they were saying this looks pretty good. For Cliftonville, that was the same. The context around a team like Cliftonville is that they won the cup, they did okay in the league, very exciting, very attacking team, but in the past few weeks they have pretty much lost a lot of their great players, a lot of their striking talent in particular. Three to four of their best attackers have moved on. Either they've retired, they came out of contract, they decided to move back to England, and then their main and their best player, Ronan Hale, who scored brilliant goals in the cup final to get in this European place. Star man, talisman, one of the most talented players in our league. Well, you know what happens to talent players in any league. They
Yeah.
get snapped up and bought. So Cliftonville are going into this game where if they had that squad that they finished the season with, they would have felt confident about. But now they're looking around thinking, who on earth is even going to start up front yet score the goals? So, like I said last week, down in the dumps. Maybe things will change going into next week.
Well, good news for you is that Auda is not RFS, uh,
Yes,
not by a long shot. In fact, even though it's a team that consists of quite a few quality and exciting players, they have just swapped coaches. And at the moment, it's a little bit more of a collection of players rather than a team. You can tell that they're struggling with organization, and they're not gelled together yet. I was watching the B36 game just before the Larne RFS, and it's a little sad to be honest because they're just struggling to find each other on the field. That being said, individually,
but
superb
that
players.
that must be exciting to have them get through, even though it looks as though it's a pretty average, middling season so far for them. Like you said, they change their coach, but to get through in any European competition, that's excellent. It obviously helps the league's coefficient.
Yeah,
So it must be a good start to this European campaign from a Latvian point of view.
it's excellent. I believe it might be the best in Europe, possibly, or on par. Um, it's not happened before. Well, not recently anyway. Last season was pretty abysmal for us in Europe, but this is all very exciting, and it's exciting for Auda as well. This was their first ever win in Europe, and first ever time going through a qualification round in Europe. And this is the oldest club in Latvia, founded in 1969. Well, the oldest, still continuing, obviously. And on that level, it's fantastic. But they're not. They have their own issues. It's not a well gelled, strong, confident team. Not yet, anyway.
So a lot of the hopes are now on RFS trying to repeat what they did a number of years ago.
Well, yeah, and it's looking kind of good. Obviously, Bodø Glimt are huge favorites. The team, according to Transfermarkt, is worth more than the entire Latvian league put together, which is, it is what it is. But anything can happen on the field. If we, can pull a Linfield on Bodø Glimt, I mean, we'll take that. That's fine. But more likely than not, that will be the last game of this year's Champions League season, and RFS will drop into the lower qualification rounds, which is also good. But it seems like group stage is something that we should look forward to, or sorry, league stage.
It's exciting, like looking at the league from afar. Like when it comes to the Northern Ireland Football League, it's a league which has been the sad kind of cousin of the English, all dominating English and Scottish leagues, and even would be seen as the little brother compared to the Republic of Ireland's division and league. How has Latvian football had to scrap and fight their way? Who's their competitors? I know it's a similarly sized nation to Northern Ireland. Do they have what's the current politics of who they're fighting against? What's the big debates or troubles or difficulties that they may face?
The difficulties are that, well, we don't have larger leagues nearby that we're fighting against. And in fact, on UEFA coefficient rankings, Latvian league is the strongest in the region. But we're in a bit of a civil war in that sense. We're fighting against ourselves because we have this weird cultural thing where, ice hockey has to be the national sport or basketball, even though domestic leagues are still inferior to the football league. And so football is a little bit of this. I don't know why, and there's no good reason for it, especially given that we did qualify for the Euros 20 years ago. But it's this almost like a shunned creature for some reason. And it's a very bizarre situation that I've never seen anywhere else. ever. But this is what it is. We're trying to build a football culture here because at the moment it doesn't exist. There used to be a little bit of it. It has since died, and now it's being built from new.
Because our big fight is trying to professionalize and trying to, it's not really a fight, but it's football is very massive across the island of Ireland, but the draw of Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Celtic, Rangers, that's where the football culture is. It's not as much following your local team. So
Yeah.
it's unique challenges to build yourself up, isn't it?
There are many similarities. When we were looking at Larne and when we had an episode on Larne, speaking to one of the fans, there are so many similarities between the Northern Irish League and the Latvian League. Both are, I mean, okay, we say we're professional, but really both are semi-professional leagues
Mhm.
that have a couple of professional clubs at the top. Both are kind of dominated by a couple of leading teams, and both struggle with fans. There's a lot to it. So in that sense, yeah, some of the challenges are similar, but at least you guys have this football gene or this, football passion in your blood. It is number one sport. Yeah, okay, so people go to England, but at least still football is on their minds. Here, arguably, it's a larger, more kind of a structural, institutional, possibly even social challenge that we're facing to even kind of teach people about football, but not to get into kind of deep societal analysis and spoil a wonderful evening for myself. Um, in essence, it was great meeting Larne and their fans. It was great learning about Northern Irish League. In terms of Cliftonville, what do you think? Are they gonna smack out on the back, or how's it
They
looking?
they are a team who this time last year had a sentiment that probably feels similar. Not exactly the same scenario, but they were coming off the back of changing their manager, and there was this feeling that perhaps they were taking a step back. And I was probably one of those people that doubted them, but they brought in their manager, Jim Mitchelton, who had been a manager at much higher levels, but perhaps a number of years ago. And they came in, brought in some great young talent, and they were exciting and they were dynamic and they proved a lot of people wrong. And now they go into this with similar challenges, questions over who's going to play, are they going to be up to the same standard as last year? And until I see them on the pitch working together, I can't tell. I think because of the week that we've had, they could play against any team from another nation, and I think an Irish League team would feel slightly insular, insecure, and meek. But this Cliftonville side are the entertainers, are a team who fear no challenge, and the manager they have, I'm sure they'll go out there, and if they can get a goal early, set themselves down, I think they've got a strong enough spine from defence to midfield. It's just going to be how they set themselves up from the absolute front line because they've lost two or three players there, and that's where the difficulty will be. But you only need one goal to win it, or maybe sneak by penalties. And I would like to think RFS maybe being the outlier that maybe once the team starts playing, that Cliftonville will feel good about themselves. But there's a lot of questions to be asked. But they were a team that were successful last year, and a lot of that spine's there, but maybe not the absolute gems in their crown.
Yeah, well, that sounds exciting and looking forward to it over the next 2 weeks. And
Indeed, this is what we look forward to all year. You
yeah,
fight for these places, and then year
yeah,
comes and it'll go. So we will be looking on from our shores here, wondering how RFS do. Northern Ireland got beat by Spain in a European warm up, and I think everybody here that supports the Northern Ireland national team have felt, We gave the eventual European champs a good go, and we were hoping for them, some fans, for them to do well. That's how we'll look at RFS if you're an Irish League fan. They beat Linfield, they beat Larne. All the best, and go on and win it. Win the Champions League. Why not?
Yeah, I don't mind. Let's do that. All right. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that's all about Northern Ireland. Let's find out more about FK Bodo Glimt and what RFS have to look forward to in the second round of the Champions League qualifiers. We're now delighted to have a special guest, the Norwegian sports journalist Jonas Giæver, today. Hello, Jonas. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience dealing with Bodo.
Hi there. Pleasure to be here, first and foremost. No, well, I'm a sports journalist. I've worked with some of the bigger news media outlets here in Norway for about a decade. At the moment, I'm working on my own startup, which is a footballing quiz app called FC Quiz, which I hope people check out. I've had the pleasure of covering Bodø Glimt on numerous occasions, primarily because when you're a sports journalist in Norway, you deal a lot with the top division of Norwegian football, and it is quite obvious that one of the teams that have really influenced the Norwegian football the past 5 years or so is the rise and rise and rise of Bodø Glimt, who have come from being not minnows, but not necessarily a team that you would recognize as the clearly most dominant side in Norway, to now having become the most dominant side in Norway, and by some stretch as well. So it's been quite interesting to follow them and their development, and both ways they have, I suppose, really evolved, and how they've kind of stayed the same as well. So this is it's quite fun to be able to be invited to things like this and speak about Bodø Glimt, because that wouldn't have been the team I would have expected I'd have to talk about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, I've got a few questions about how the Norwegian league seems to have transformed in the past decade. But get back to your quiz quickly. How's that coming along? And have you got any Latvian football clubs featured in it? Or will there be any questions about football in Latvia?
We'd love to. I mean, we'd absolutely love to have that. I mean, we got to say that you're the experts. So we have everything open for content creators, for podcasts, for experts, for whomever it might be. So if you guys would like to feature a quiz on the Latvian league, we would be more than happy to host that for you guys. So we could speak about that, and obviously find a way to make sure that is involved and included as soon as possible.
We all love a quiz, and the VS League are actually they put on a quiz night once a week, I believe, so far this season. But anyway, moving on. So tell us a little bit about FK Bodo Glimt's style of play and what FK RFS should expect.
In terms of style of play, in Norway we have I suppose a train of thought, or a school of thought rather, which is called Eggen-skolen, which comes from the mind of Nils Arne Eggen, who a lot of people recognize as the mastermind behind Rosenborg's dominance in the 90s and 2000s. Kjetil Knutsen, the manager of Bodø Glimt, is known as a disciple of that style of play and that way of viewing football, though he has been able to modernize it quite a bit by looking at clubs such as Liverpool, for example. I know he's a big fan of Jurgen Klopp and how Klopp deals with certain things, and somehow created this into a hybrid where we see a lot of the things that we recognize from that Rosenborg side that obviously beat the likes of Real Madrid and Borussia Dortmund and AC Milan in the 90s, with a lot of the same style we've seen Liverpool have under Jurgen Klopp. So they're a team that is able to sort of combine the level of pressing that you've seen with Liverpool, and also with the quick fire, straightforward style of football that we recognize having seen with Rosenborg, and they do so quite diligently, almost regardless of which team they face. They don't shy away from their style of play, and they always like to dominate the matches. They're not looking to keep the ball as much as perhaps you'd think, but based on their high levels of energy and the way that they do play the game, they somehow end up with the ball, and usually also end up with the most amount of goals. And I think goals is probably, it's kind of strange to say that their big strength is that they score goals, but it really is their big strength. They score a lot of goals, and it comes from almost anywhere. They've had sort of recognized goal scorers the past 5 years, of course, but it's always been two, maybe even three really recognized goal scorers that they've had. So that's sort of how they play, I suppose.
And is that based on their formations? They typically play a 4-3-3.
Yeah, definitely. They've always played with a recognized striker, a number nine that links up play a lot. But they've always found goals from their wingers as well. And then they have a number eight, usually one every season, that ends up with 10, 15 goals as well. So they're just able to find ways. If you stop them one way, they'll attack you another way. And they've somehow as well, they kind of papered over their defensive cracks a little bit by being able to score as many goals as they have. And I think that they've managed to intimidate a lot of sides by their sheer goal scoring prowess and being able to find the back of the net as often and as prolifically as they have.
So they're a very attacking team. Would you say they're very quite fast, pacey, counter-attacking team? And who are the pacey players within the team? Where does the speed come from?
It comes from their wingers and their fullbacks primarily. They've always had really quick wingers. Now they have sort of signed back Jens Petter Hauge, who a lot of people will remember from having been at Milan, for example, and who was kind of part of that first integration of Kjetil Knutsen's Bodø Glimt side. He's now back in the team. August Mikkelsen, who they've signed from Sweden after, who actually was I suppose raised in the academy of Tromsø, who are the arch rivals of Bodø Glimt. He's now become a Bodø Glimt player, and obviously is one that they try to use as much as possible. So those are two of the quicker ones. Sondre Sørli has been one of those players that they've used quite a bit as well on the sides. Fredrik Bjørkan, the fullback, had a stint in Germany, as well as Brice Wembangumo on the other side, who a lot of people remember for his fantastic performances against Celtic.
So they've got plenty of European club experience, the team, and a solid amount of experience.
Certainly do, and so it's sort of become a bit of a joke, and suppose a lot of people take the mick out of Bodø Glimt for this, but it's kind of when they sell a player, they're almost guaranteed that they return in 2 or 3 years' time, and that is probably down to the way that they play, but also down to where they play, because they play on an artificial pitch. Obviously, they're quite northern based. I believe they're the second northernmost club in Norway, obviously, with Tromsø being the northernmost, and perhaps also the northernmost club that plays in a top division in Europe, maybe even the world, if my memory serves me correctly. But anyways, it still is one of those things that is often used as an argument against Bodø Glimt.
I was going to say, because they're such an attacking team, do they get caught on the with the opposition countering, and is that what's given them a leaky defense in the past to concede goals? Fullbacks going too forward and being caught off guard.
Yeah, we saw that. I remember Dinamo Zagreb did that quite a bit, because Dinamo Zagreb were a team that when they faced off in the qualifiers a couple of seasons ago now, they sat back and they allowed Bodø Glimt to sort of push them back, and then they would spring on the counter and they'd get a goal. And I remember that being an argument that they really lack that pace going the other way. Obviously, they have plenty of pace going forward, but they've lacked it, especially in central defense. And they've kind of tried to address that a little bit now with the signing of Jostein Gundersen, for example, who's arrived from their arch rivals. They signed the best defensive player from their arch rivals, which in Norway is sort of, you can compare it to Manchester United signing a player from Liverpool. And it was a big deal once it happened. He's come in and he's since become a Norwegian international, which kind of tells you the status that Bodø Glimt have in Norway.
I mean, it's like it's like an RFS player moving over to Riga FC and vice versa.
There you go. There's a
bit of a grudge there, and I see that they've made over 19 million in selling players. So do they tend to have lots of rotation of players coming and going, or they manage to hold the squad quite well throughout the season?
They usually do lose a player either during the summer. One of the big players, like now, for example, they lost Albert Grønbæk, who was gone to French football.
Yeah, I've just seen,
Who's
yeah.
It's a big loss for them because he's a record sale first and foremost. It's a massive sale. It's
Yeah,
the
over
biggest
10
ever
million.
sale.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 15 million, I believe, 15
Okay.
million euros. They managed to get out of him, and he's going to French football. It's the biggest sale out of Norway ever, which tells you perhaps a little bit about the economy in European football, but also tells you about the fantastic ways that Bodø Glimt are running their club. I mean, they,
Yeah.
they are in a completely different level than the rest in terms of
They seem
economy.
to
But
be
lose
they seem to have a good model, and where they're making profit from player sales and player development.
insane profits, and the way that they do it is usually Grønbæk was a really expensive purchase for them, but they're selling him at an extreme profit. So it was a calculated risk that they took, it seems, and one that's paid off massively. But they've had a history of buying players on the cheap or developing players on the cheap and then selling them for massive amounts of money. Erik Botheim, for example, was an example of that. One of the real goal scorers that they have a couple of seasons ago that they got for free from Rosenborg because he didn't work there, and then he eventually became a striker that they sold for massive amounts of money to Russia. So that's one of the ways that they've done it previously.
So you mentioned a lot of them have European club experience. Is it a squad which is a balance of a blend of youth and experience? Are there many youth players that are pushed into the senior squad?
I suppose right now they aren't as youthful as you'd think. I mean, if I'm thinking really quickly here now, I don't think that there's really any big youth graduate that plays for him, with the exception of, well, they have Patrick Berg in midfield, obviously, who was an Norwegian international. He had a really failed stint at Lens, and then he returned. Fredrik Bjørkan, who plays on the left side, is the son of Åsmund Bjørkan, who's in the training setup or the coaching setup. He was also at Hertha Berlin and then returned. Ulrik Saltnes in midfield was one of those players that played a lot of local football around the area and then became a sort of a staple of the club. So they do have certain players and certain individuals that sort of carry the heart and soul of the club that have kind of seemingly, despite the fact that they have left, they've always returned or always been around the club one way or another. So they do have, I suppose, heartbeats within their side.
They miss the long summers when they go away, I guess.
Certainly do, and the midnight suns and as
Yeah.
well.
Okay, so you mentioned Dynamo Zagreb. I guess that was well in the 2022-2023 UEFA Champions League qualifiers. The team lost away games against Faroe Islands, Northern Ireland, and Croatia, and also drew a team from Lithuania. Has Bodo fixed the away game problem, or do they still overly rely on home games?
I think that one of the issues that they've had in terms of those things is that in Norway we have a summer break in the middle of the season. Some of those games have come in summer breaks or come in and around the summer breaks where perhaps the players haven't been as fit. And sometimes they've also rotated their squad for those away fixtures. So they will probably play their first teamers, I suppose, more so in the home fixtures, and then considering the fact that they kind of have to save their players for the league season or for the league fixtures, it has happened that they've rotated. I think with certain games that we discussed here, they've just been beaten. They've been beaten. Their first teamers have been beaten, which has
I
happened.
looked
But I
at the
think that
form.
come
They've won 3 out of 5, drawn one, lost one.
Yeah, exactly. I know that one of the things that they've struggled with, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier, is that when they face teams that play on grass and perhaps a wider pitch than they've had themselves, they haven't been found out, but you've seen sort of chinks in their armor, I suppose. But
In
I don't necessarily.
what sense haven't they been found out? What's the chink in the armor?
It has been the defensive errors that they've had with the lack of pace over the course of longer distances, for example, which they've tried to sort of fix and mend now a little bit with a few of their signings, and also the way that they set up a lot of their defensive schemes, I should say. So I think that they've been able to address it in one way, and I'm very curious to see how they'll I suppose, viewed as going into this qualifying rounds of the Champions League, because it's really viewed in Norway as this is sort of a make or break year for a lot of the teams in terms of getting the Champions League purse, because obviously there's more money being pumped into the Champions League, and by getting there this season, that is, the Shangri-La for a lot of the Norwegian clubs, and for Bodø Glimt's sake, I think that if they qualify,
I think everybody's up for the Champions League, to be honest. But so you feel that it's the away form is down to rotation systems, and they're currently fighting an aggressive sort of first. They're trying to win the championship right now as well. What won Bodo the league last year? Who were the standout players? You might have mentioned some already, but I mean, what was the defining thing that won them the league last year?
goals. They scored 25, 30 more goals than the next team in the table. I mean, they score an abundance of goals, and they just hammer them in from everywhere. I mean, last season, I'd say that their standout was probably Amal Pellegrino, who's now left for the MLS. Um, Fares Mumbanya as well, their striker, who's left for Marseille. He was one of the best players that they had last season. Albert Grønbæk, who we just mentioned, who just went to France as well. He was a standout player, which tells you that there's a lot of players that stand out and then decide to leave the club quite quickly as soon as a big club comes with a hefty paycheck. They keep leaving.
Are they as strong as they were last season? Are they as strong this season as they were last season? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I'd say no. They lack a really recognized goal scorer. They've tried on several occasions to recruit goal scorers. They've had Kasper Høeg, for example, who they recruited, who struggled a lot with injuries. August Mikkelsen, who I alluded to a little bit earlier, who they signed from Sweden. I think that they wanted to make into a goal scorer. They got Jens Petter Hauge and Håkon Evjen, who are both former Bodø Glimt players who returned this season, who both has had goal scoring seasons for them, but they haven't really clicked into form yet. And they've just announced the signing of Andreas Helmersen, who is arriving from Egersund, who is the top scorer in the second division in Norway. So they're addressing their lack of goals, I suppose, in different ways. So I think they want to spread the goals more evenly amongst their players, perhaps more so than they have previously.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so they're not so reliant on individuals, and it's more of a team effort. The head coach, Ketil Knutsen, I realize I might mispronounce that, but he's climbed the ranks from a Norwegian fifth-tier club. What type of manager is he?
He's quite demanding. He's become something of a controversial character over the past couple of years because he is as demanding as he is of his surroundings. There's been a big story now in Norway about how he refused to substitute one of his players despite the fact that he was clearly suffering from a head injury, which there are obviously polarizing opinions on. But he's become sort of a head honcho of managers here in Norway. He's really become sort of um, a linchpin for Norwegian managers in many ways. He keeps being linked away. Ajax were looking at him. I believe Burnley were as well mentioned with him. He keeps being mentioned with a lot of big coaching jobs around Europe. He's a disciple of the Eggen Skolen. He believes in 4-3-3. He won't shy away from that. He has his clear principles. He has his clear philosophy. But what he is able to create is sort of this nucleus within a group. He's able to create that team spirit where it's not necessarily them against the world, but more so that they have something that the others don't have. And they keep, in a lot of ways, they keep nurturing what makes Bodø Glimt as special as they are. So he's one of those really, I suppose, idealistic managers in one way, but at the same time quite ruthless. So he's a great blend of both, but he's become that. He was probably a little bit more lenient previously. Perhaps he never really got it to click as well, but he's been given freedom of power in Bodø Glimt, and he's really created them into a powerhouse, and they'll remain a powerhouse even after when he leaves. I'm assuming.
So he's a great man motivator as well. He motivates the team, and he operates in a well-organized squad.
Certainly, but I think one of the things that he's really good at is also recognizing when he needs help. He's good at recognizing when he needs other voices around him. And that is one thing that perhaps hasn't been mentioned as much at least not I suppose by foreign media when they speak about Bodø Glimt, is that they've been able to hire in a mental coach that is someone that almost has become a little bit of a psychologist for a lot of the players, who allows them to not think about pressure, who allows them to sort of be free and not necessarily be swamped up by the pressures of elite football. That's one thing, and the other thing as well, which is again good to mention, they signed the head coach. I mean, the head coach of their arch rival. They went out and they signed him, and he's now their assistant manager. So they went and they got both the best defender and the manager of their arch rival, who are now in their team because they've recognized that they were better, and there was some people that could really add to their setup. So he's good at recognizing those things, which I think is a little bit under communicated at times.
Yeah, resourceful and got a knack for recognizing and bringing in talent to grow faster, I guess. Moving on then, will we see many Bodø Glimt supporters visit Latvia and tell us a little bit about the fan base at the club?
Yeah, I mean, Norway has, or Norwegians have a tradition of going to Riga or going to Latvia, I suppose, for cheap beer and to have fun, I guess. So I'm not going to. I wouldn't rule out seeing a lot of Norwegians traveling. Bodø Glimt supporters are passionate. They're very passionate, and they follow their side wherever they go. And you'll recognize them because they'll all be dressed in yellow from top to bottom. They're loud. They're always very polite. They're always quite cordial, and they're not seen as really any sort of ruckus, or people are afraid of them when they come to town, or they're not hooligan based or anything. But they're loud. They're from the north of Norway. Northern Norwegians are known as being quite direct and without filter, and I tend to love Northern Norwegians because they're a lot like us from the capital and being very direct about things. But they're a fun-loving crowd, and they always carry a big brush. A big toothbrush. Okay. You'll see that they'll carry their big toothbrush with them, so they'll be easy to recognize.
We hope to see a really big toothbrush in Riga. We had the Larne fans from Northern Ireland visit, and they created a really special atmosphere at RFS in the previous qualifier. So yeah, we'd love to see Norwegian supporters, particularly from Bodø, turning up, enjoying the great beer in the stand, and yeah, creating a nice atmosphere. So I guess we're slowly running out of time. But what do you think makes the club itself unique and special?
That they are a quite small club from a quite small town or city, I suppose they would call themselves. You can walk from the airport to the stadium, like literally. I've done it. It's really close between the two. So they are a minnow in many ways, but they have somehow very sensibly managed to make themselves into the most powerful club in Norwegian football as of 2024. It's remarkable. It's not a rich uncle that has pumped in a lot of money or things like that. They've really done this quite organically.
A bit of a fairy tale club that have risen from a small humble beginnings to grow into a proper European club team that have previously beaten the likes of Besiktas and from Turkey and so on. Just one quick point. I guess we've got about 3-4 minutes left. How is Norwegian football doing? Like Rosenborg, they used to, you mentioned them before. They're kind of stuck in mid-table at the moment. What's the state of Norwegian club football?
It's at a level that we haven't seen for quite some time. The only detriment is that we haven't seen European clubs being as good as they are now. So getting into European football, especially into the Champions League, has never been more difficult. But the level of the clubs, especially Bodø Glimt and Molde as well, who you perhaps recognize from their stints around Europa League, especially, they are at a different level than the rest. Brann as well, who are coming a little bit behind them from Bergen. They're close to being there as well. But a lot of Norwegian clubs are pushing for Europe for the first time in quite some time. And I think that with Bodø Glimt becoming the locomotive, I think it's really spurred on a lot of the other clubs and has really awakened Norwegian football again from being a bit of a slumber. So the state of Norwegian football is really good.
Yeah, and you've got some brilliant international players for the national team as well.
We're just not making it into we're just not making the international tournaments, unfortunately, but we do have some of the best players. Yeah.
You never know. I'm sure their time will come. I mean, they've got an absolutely magnificent individuals within that national team. But I guess that's all we've got time for. Will you be visiting Riga and watching the qualifiers?
I'd love to. I might have to consider it now after having had this chat and thinking about going there, especially considering the prices in Norway. I might have to go there for a bit of a cheaper way of having a bit of fun. So I have to consider it. I've never been to Latvia, so I'd love to go actually.
Well, you're always welcome, and if you do come to the game, we'll probably see you in the press box. But that's all we've got time for today. But thank you so much, Jonas, for your time. And I'm just going to finish with may the best team win. We're really excited about everything that's going to happen about this fixture. RFS are in good form at the moment. They played really well in the first round. So from a Latvian perspective, I think everybody in the country is really excited. But yeah, please remember to leave your thoughts, like, share, leave your comments. We love a good debate, and we always want our listeners to be part of it. We also continue to look for media volunteers. If you'd like to be involved in this podcast, then please contact us anytime. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Jonas.